Hello, and welcome back to Retro TV Playhouse, the show where we explore 20th century television. I'm your host, Tabitha, and we have completed our Western month. Yay! We might have more down the line, who knows. And we are moving on to Cop Show month. We're kicking it off with my longest favorite TV show, Starsky and Hutch. The show has been in my life for, almost 25 years. I told you all in my first episode that I've been chasing the high of this show since I first saw it, and because of that, I am something of a buddy cop aficionado, though I do still have some blind spots. But in general, I love them. Give me incurably codependent partners who put their lives in each other's hands every day and constantly run into dangerous situations, and I'll be happy. Bonus points if they're the most important person in each other's lives. That's the only way it really works. You know, I'm a simple fangirl that way. I've encountered some fantastic ones over the years, but none of them hit quite like this one does. I'm going to try to keep this concise because I could talk about this show for the next year. Starsky and Hutch was an Aaron Spelling production, and I've got mixed feelings on him because I've come across a few stories where writers say that Spelling would promise them something and then renege on it, and I guess that's not surprising, given that it's Hollywood, but still, jerk. The series was created by William Blinn, who had previously ran The Rookies for Spelling and Leonard Goldberg. And Blinn did not like The Rookies, and we'll get to that show one day, I'm sure. The show originally began life as a script called Nightside, or Nightline, one of the two, based on an article that Blinn had read in the New York Times about two cops who only worked at night. Unfortunately, filming something solely at night for television in the 1970s was way too expensive, so that script was shelved for a couple of years. Eventually, out of spite over some phone call between ABC and Warner Brothers, and I'm completely serious about that part, Spelling was asked to brush off the Nightside script and simply remove the night aspect of it. Spelling called Blinn and had him rework the script, and that became Starsky and Hutch. So if not for the pettiness of some studio execs, we probably wouldn't have this show. Crazy. However, there was a TV movie/failed pilot from 1980 called Nightside, starring Doug McClure, about two cops who worked at night. Though it's credited to writers Glenn A. Larson and Stephen J. Cannell, they had to have taken it from Blinn's script, right? There's no way that's a coincidence. No way. Anyway, William Blinn was born in Toledo. He moved out to California in the 1960s to pursue his writing career, and his first credit on IMDb was an episode of Rawhide. He wrote for Bonanza, The Big Valley, and The High Chaparral, every show we talked about last month. He also wrote 6 episodes of David Soul's pre-Starsky and Hutch show, Here Come the Brides. Fun fact. He really broke through when he wrote the telefilm Brian's Song, and if you've seen that, you'll know that he can be trusted to write a good bromance. Unfortunately, he didn't stay with the show for very long. Spelling and Goldberg wanted to make a straightforward good guys versus bad guys show, and Blinn wanted something deeper than that. But he was outranked. He left the show after about 3 months. It's really too bad, because this is already the gold standard for buddy cop shows, in my opinion, and the homoeroticism is off the charts. But I think it could have even been more so if Blinn had stayed in charge. Because you know what one of his ideas was that never came to pass? So, Hutch canonically has an ex-wife, and Blinn wanted to do a story where she sues Starsky for alienation of affection. We could have had it all. Are you kidding me? That would have been amazing. We really live in the worst timeline. Anyway, Blinn did pretty well for himself after Starsky and Hutch. He wrote for Roots, he wrote for Fame, he created 8 is Enough, and he co-wrote Purple Rain. Always struck me as a little odd. He also created a show called Pensacola, Wings of Gold, which I've never heard of, but it starred James Brolin and ran for 3 seasons. He passed away in 2020 at age 83. The series starred Paul Michael Glaser as David Starsky and David Soul as Ken Hutchinson, and they were 2 street detectives. Antonio Fargas co-starred as their friend and informant Huggy Bear Brown, and Bernie Hamilton as their boss, Captain Harold Dobie. Paul Michael Glaser was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts as the youngest child and only boy in the family. He graduated from Boston University with a master's degree in fine arts, and he is also my boyfriend. That's a little known fact about him. He scored a recurring role on the soap opera Love is a Many Splendored Thing in 1969. From there, he made his big screen debut in Fiddler on the Roof, and yes, I did only watch that movie because he's in it. What about it? He had more film roles and guest spots on television for a few years, and a lot of them were under the name Michael Glazer. When he read the script for the pilot of Starsky and Hutch, he thought to himself that it would never get picked up for series, which is funny and also kind of insulting to William Blinn, is it not? So he headed for his audition with some walnuts for snacks, because he hadn't eaten that day. So through the audition, he was cracking and eating walnuts. And if that isn't the most Starsky thing to do, then I don't know what is. He got the part. And he was maybe not super thrilled about it. He tried multiple times as the series went on to get out of his contract, to the point where the show was coming up with backup plans in case he succeeded. They had a policewoman, played by Roz Kelly, that I heard was a potential replacement, but she was only in one episode. Her character, anyway. Roz Kelly, the actress, was in 4 episodes. They brought in Starsky's brother for an episode, who played a petty criminal, so I have no idea how that was gonna work, but I guess you could have kept the title that way. Luckily for us, Glazer was unable to get out of the series and completed the 4-year run. And he has come to embrace it. That makes me happy. But even through all that, he and David Soul remained close friends for the rest of their lives. Post Starsky and Hutch, Glazer still acted, but he switched his main career focus to directing. He even directed 5 episodes of Starsky and Hutch. A couple of them are absolute standouts because of the direction, in my opinion. They look different from the other episodes, in a good way. His 2 most well-known directorial efforts were The Running Man and The Cutting Edge. Unfortunately, he also directed Kazam, with Shaq. Listen, nobody's perfect, okay? Back up off of him right now. He directed quite a bit of television in the 2000s as well, including Judging Amy, Third Watch, and Criminal Minds. He was a producer on Double Impact, the Van Damme movie, for some reason, and he was a producer on Shark Tank from 2010 through 2014. Again, for some reason. But this is according to IMDb. Paul Michael Glazer was dealt a really rough hand personally. When his first wife, Elizabeth, delivered their first child, she had unknowingly contracted HIV from a blood transfusion and passed it on to their daughter, Ariel, via breast milk, and later on to their son, Jake, in utero, before they found out. Ariel passed away in 1988. I think she was about 7. Elizabeth founded the Pediatric AIDS Foundation and fought hard for her children and all children affected with HIV and AIDS. She passed away from the disease in 1994. Happily, his son Jake is still alive and doing well. I've watched some interviews with him, and he seems like a very intelligent and level-headed guy. I wish him continued good health. Glazer remarried once in 1996 and had a second daughter, Zoe. His second marriage ended in 2007, but from what I've read, she legally adopted Jake, and he still has a relationship with her. And that's great if it's true. Glazer is pretty much retired at this point and spends his time painting. He's had a few art shows, and I'd love the opportunity to go to one at some point. As of this recording, he's still with us. All the best to him, Jake, and Zoe. David Soul didn't audition for the show. He was just offered it, apparently because of his role in the movie Magnum Force. He read the script and said he wanted to play Starsky because he was a more interesting character than Hutch. And in my opinion, he was spot on about that. But he was told, no, you're gonna play Hutch. Well, that's him told, isn't it? And I'm assuming since he was the more well-known at the time, he was credited first, even though the show is called Starsky and Hutch, not Hutch and Starsky. That is something that has always bugged me, that David Soul gets top billing. The first name in the title should be the first actor credited. Sorry, that bugs me. Soul was born David Solberg in Chicago, Illinois. His family moved around a lot when he was a child due to his father's job. As a young adult, they moved to Mexico City, and Soul became fluent in Spanish and was inspired to pick up a guitar and focus on music. And Soul did have a fairly successful music career for a while. You may know Don't Give Up on Us, Baby. Or if you're already a fan of Starsky and Hutch, you probably know Black Bean Soup. He made his television debut on Flipper in 1967, how adorable is that? But the earliest thing I remember seeing him in was an episode of Star Trek called The Apple, where he played one of the aliens. And they had white blonde hair and red skin. It kind of made them look comically sunburned. It's not a great episode, but I enjoy it. His first starring series was the Western adventure romance called Here Come the Brides, which I still haven't seen, but I know a lot of Starsky and Hutch fans love it. I need to get around to it. This series also starred Bobby Sherman, Mark Leonard, and my girlfriend Joan Blondell, who, by the way, also once guest starred on Starsky and Hutch. The show lasted 2 seasons, but when it was over, he still found plenty of work, including a guest spot on the streets of San Francisco, where he played a brown Latino man passing as a white man. Yes, I know there are white Latinx people, but David Soul is not one of them. I'm guessing he was only cast because he spoke Spanish. Glazer also did an episode of Streets. Soul got to direct a few Starsky and Hutch episodes too, and they're not as distinct as Glazer's are, but they're still good. He directed a few more episodes of television for Hunter, In the Heat of the Night, and China Beach. He was pretty happy to have Starsky and Hutch, and he really championed it. Post-SNH, he worked a lot in TV, movies, and miniseries. You might remember him as the lead in Salem's Lot. And he had a couple more short-lived series, The Yellow Rose and Unsub. Okay, I've seen all of Unsub, and it's pretty terrible. Like, picture the show Hannibal, except Hannibal's not in it, and also it's really bad. Personally, he was kind of a mess for a long time. He was married 5 times and had plenty of mistresses along the way. He had 5 children altogether. He was also an alcoholic, and when his 3rd wife was 7 months pregnant, he attacked her. He eventually did seek help, and I believe he sincerely changed. He spoke very openly about it, and he went to men's prisons and probation centers to talk about his experience to try and help others break the cycle of violence. I think he's a great example of someone who actually did the work to become a better person. He married his last wife in 2010, and they were married until his passing just this year at age 80. Prior to his death, he'd been living in the UK for decades and obtained citizenship in 2004. Antonio Fargas was born in New York City. He started working on film and in television in the 60s. He worked a lot on blaxploitation movies like Across 110th Street, Shaft, Cleopatra Jones, and Foxy Brown. I very recently saw an episode of Police Story that had Fargas and Bernie Hamilton, and I was so excited, especially since Hamilton played a bad guy, and I'm not used to that. Anyway, Fargas played a couple of LGBT characters too, which I thought was cool. In Busting, which apparently was also part of the inspiration for Starsky and Hutch, maybe, but is also not a great movie and definitely not sympathetic to LGBT people. And in Car Wash, where he had the iconic line, quote, "I am more man than you'll ever be and more woman than you'll ever get," end quote. Such a good line. He also starred as Jim in a 1975 TV movie adaptation of Huckleberry Finn with Ron Howard as Huck and Don Most as Tom Sawyer. Okay, I need to see that. After Starsky and Hutch, he continued to get work. He even had a recurring role on Everybody Hates Chris in the 2000s. Fun fact, his son Justin Fargas was a pro football player. He was a running back for the Oakland Raiders, which is especially funny to me because Antonio is so skinny. Like, he's so skinny! As of this recording, Fargas is still with us. And rounding out the cast is Bernie Hamilton. He was born in LA, and his brother Chico was a jazz drummer and band leader. He became interested in acting while he was in high school, and he got a lot of bit parts in the 1950s. He's in a fantastic episode of The Twilight Zone called Shadow Play. He also served in the Army during the Korean War. He got a lot of guest spots on television in the 60s on The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Ben Casey, and Ironside. He's got a very small part in the underseen brilliant drama called The Swimmer with Burt Lancaster. His big film role was in the movie One Potato, Two Potato in 1964. He starred in that movie with Barbara Barry, and it's about the trials and tribulation of an interracial marriage. In the pilot for SNH, Richard Ward played Captain Doby. I am unsure what happened there, that he didn't get the role for series, but he did guest star on a season 4 episode, Huggy Can't Go Home. In any case, it was Spelling and Leonard Goldberg's idea to cast Hamilton because they had worked with him before. According to IMDb, he was originally cast in the James Earl Jones part in Claudine, but when poor Diana Sands, the original star, had to drop out due to her failing health, she was replaced by Diane Carroll, and I guess they just weren't right together on film. Anyway, he got replaced when Sands did. After SNH, he largely gave up acting, only taking a few more roles. Instead, he focused on music. He became a producer of R&B and gospel records under his own label Chocolate Snowman, which is a fantastic name. He also ran a nightclub/art gallery called Citadel de Haiti that was located on Sunset Boulevard. And he joins Lauren Green and Pernell Roberts in making his own album. His was called Captain Dobie Sings the Blues. Why do they keep doing this to me? He was married one time and got divorced in 1968, but he did have 2 children, Candy and Raoul. Hamilton passed away in 2008 at age 80. Now, what made this show so special as opposed to other buddy cop shows is that those shows are about cops who are partners. This show is about partners who happen to be cops. And I can back that up. There's a 3-parter in season 4 where they quit the force and start going on joint job interviews. Because they're just always going to stay together. It's a given for them. They can't conceive of not being together even if they're no longer cops. And pretty much everyone involved in the show will tell you that the series was a love story. Aaron Spelling will tell you, William Blinn will tell you, series writer Ron Friedman will tell you, Paul Michael Glaser will tell you, and David Soul simply wouldn't stop telling you. In fact, he's, I believe, the first one who said the show's not about cops, it's about 2 partners who happen to be cops. Also, I can't track down the original source of this, but apparently at the time, media sources referred to Starsky and Hutch as, quote, French-kissing primetime homos, end quote. The closest to the original I can find is a brief video of outtakes with a narrator chiming in once in a while, and he says it. That's a phrase that many fans wear with pride, including myself. The core relationship is what makes the show stand out and endure. Unless you're one of those people who only remembers and likes it for the car, in which case I just don't think we're going to have much in common. Speaking of the car, Blinn originally wrote it as a green and white Camaro because that's the kind of car he had at one point and he adored it. Sadly, ABC did not have a deal with Chevrolet. They had a deal with Ford. So Starsky's Camaro became a Torino. As to why it's red and white instead of green and white, unsure. Glaser said it was a bitch to drive, but boy, it sure looked sexy, didn't it? And that's all I have to say about the car. It's cool, but I don't really care that much. Moving on. David Starsky is a streetwise, enthusiastic, but deeply intense and often fun-loving guy. A New York transplant as he was sent away to Bay City, California after his father was killed. He was raised by an aunt and uncle after that. But despite that, he calls his mother every week. He has one brother named Nick, and Nick is the worst. Thank God he only showed up one time. There are hints about his father, and some fans speculate that he was a cop killed in the line of duty. Others, like me, speculate that he was a criminal killed due to his illegal activity. I think that's much more interesting to play around with personally. Starsky served in the Army and was possibly in Vietnam, but that part was never outright confirmed. He loves his car, he loves to eat, and he loves Hutch. He's great at his job, he's very compassionate, and his ass looks great in tight jeans. Also, he gets shot a lot. Like almost once a season. He does avoid it in season 2. I was very proud of him for that. I love and adore him and would take him for my husband if he wasn't already married to Hutch. Hutch is the more book-smart one, and he's also a transplant. He's from Duluth, Minnesota. We don't know anything about his parents except that he does in fact have a mother. Most fans speculate that he came from a wealthy background and disappointed his parents when he chose to become a cop, but that's all speculation. We do know that he was a Sea Scout as a child, which according to him wasn't easy due to the fact that he lived in landlocked Minnesota. He has a kind of white knight complex, lots of women who he thinks he can save. He also has a slight tendency to run into dangerous situations without telling Starsky or anyone else about it. He's a health nut, at least until season 4 when he kind of gives up on life. He was married once to a woman named Vanessa, who was named Nancy in the pilot. Some take that to mean he was married twice. I sincerely doubt that. I can just overlook it as they decided to change her name later on. They split up because she thought being married to a cop had no future, and also probably because he was sleeping with Starsky. His home gets broken into all the time. Like, it's practically a public space by the end of the series. You'd think at some point he'd up his security, but he never ever does. He also loves plants. His place has plants everywhere, and he greets them when he gets home, because he's an absolute dork. He's very shy when it comes to, like, performing and being on stage, and that causes him to become very clumsy, which is also very cute. Despite the fact that he eats very healthy and he's disgusted by the way Starsky eats, Hutch has a horribly filthy car. It's just a disaster. It's ugly, it barely works, the inside is a mess too. There was a boat wheel in there at one point, just ridiculous. Starsky hates it, which is probably part of the reason that Hutch loves it. I do think he can sometimes be too mean to Starsky in his teasing, although I've been told that I'm too mean when I try to tease too, so I guess he's kind of relatable. Perhaps I have some soul searching to do. Their backstory together is nebulous as well. They went to the academy together. It's unclear if they were partners while they were patrolmen. Starsky made detective first, and in season 2, they said they've been partners for about 5 years. Even though they work together every day, they spend practically all their free time together too. They go on vacations together, they have date nights together. Hutch will call up Starsky's mother to get the recipe for his favorite meal and cook it for him to cheer him up. Starsky will get Hutch a new piece of junk car after his first one gets totaled, and Hutch will love it. They'll risk their careers, freedom, and lives for each other. Oh yeah, and they buy a house together one time too. I mean, what am I supposed to think? They're in love. They're married. They're soulmates. Don't blame me, I didn't write it. Huggy Bear, despite what you may have heard, is not a pimp. Maybe you could argue that in the pilot he's supposed to be a pimp, but that's only because he has one scene and we don't learn anything about him. Through season 1, he owns a restaurant called Huggies. In season 2, he's got a bunch of random odd jobs. And in seasons 3 and 4, he owns another place called The Pits. He's connected to seemingly everyone in the city. He can get the guys any information they need, and he's a good guy. He's loyal, even to his own detriment. The show needs him. It wouldn't have the same flavor without him. Blinn named the character after a bootleg DJ he heard on the radio one night and said he thought it was a great name, which, to be clear, it is. Captain Harold Dobie, unfortunately, is the least developed character. He only gets 1 episode about him, and Huggy gets, I think, 3, unless I'm forgetting one. Dobie has a wife, Edith, and 2 kids, a teenage boy named Cal and a cutie pie little girl named Rosie. He fulfills the usual angry, yelling police captain role, but luckily he gets to play emotions other than anger. He really cares about the boys. They usually are able to come to him with anything, even if it's not strictly above board. He exudes authority and demands respect very well. Though aside from the actor changing, I don't think they had Dobie fully figured out in the pilot, because it involved corrupt cops and they suspect Dobie, which offends me. It takes Huggy telling them that Dobie's a good cop before they move on from that theory. And, Dobie would never, and they should know that. He looks out for Starsky and Hutch as best he can. Dobie may be a typical police captain role that you see in most cop shows and cop movies, but Hamilton still manages to make him feel not like a total cliche, and I think he deserves credit for that. The episode I've chosen for tonight is Season 2, Episode 15, The Psychic. The episode was written by Michael Mann. Yes, that Michael Mann. He wrote 4 episodes for this show, and when he went on to executive produce Miami Vice, Glazer and Soul both directed some episodes of that series, and Fargus guest starred. I think all of Mann's episodes for Starsky and Hutch are pretty strong, but this is by far my favorite. The episode was directed by Don Weiss. Weiss was born in Milwaukee. He graduated from the University of Southern California with a degree in film studies, worked as an assistant on a lot of Stanley Kramer films, and ended up directing a lot of films through the 50s and 60s. But from what I understand, they're mostly pretty lackluster. He did much better for himself on television, working on everything from The Twilight Zone to Batman, from Simon and Simon to Freddy's Nightmares. He was married twice and had 2 children with each wife. He directed 7 SNH episodes, and this was actually his last one. The episode aired on January 15th, 1977. It ran against All in the Family and Alice on CBS, and the TV movie The Deadly Tower on NBC. A couple of notable guest stars appear in this one. Edward James Olmos has a very small part here. I think he has 2 lines and then he dies. And the Michael Mann connection is there because, of course, he went on to play Lieutenant Castillo on Miami Vice. And James Hong shows up for one scene, too. The IMDb synopsis for The Psychic says, quote, "A psychic running a diner helps Starsky and Hutch when a schoolgirl daughter of a wealthy football team owner is kidnapped." End quote. Okay, that is technically correct, but when they put it like that, it sounds really stupid, but I promise you it's not. This episode is one of 8 that were turned into novelizations by author Max Franklin. And yes, I have read all 8 of them. What about it? They're not great writing or anything, but what I appreciate about the S&H novels is that they only adapt 1 episode per book. Most hour-long dramas with novelization usually awkwardly cram 2 episodes into 1 book, unless they're adapting a 2-parter or a pilot movie. I like that the S&H books just expand on the episode. Hell, The Professionals novelizations sometimes cram 3 episodes per book. That's just ridiculous. I'm pretty sure the writer worked off an early draft of the script, not the shooting script, because there are some differences in all of the books. It's fun to see some added scenes, and they were correct to adapt this episode because it is a highlight. Alright, let's get into the episode proper. This show doesn't have any teasers. We just jump right into the credits. Every season has a different theme tune, and I always think that season 3 is my favorite, but then I instantly forget it as soon as it's over. I can't even recall it right now. Season 1 is just very much action music. Season 2, the one for this episode, is funky, almost pornographic, but faster paced, I assume. And Season 4 is just a remix of Season 2. Season 3 is great. Even if I can't actually remember how it goes, I do remember loving it, so shut up. After the porno credits, we see our guys in the Torino chasing a man in a dress down the streets of Bay City, which is just LA. Funny thing about this opening, it was pulled from a Season 1 episode, The Omaha Tiger. In fact, when I first saw this episode, I thought TV Guide must have been wrong. Because if you think I don't know The Omaha Tiger when I see it, you're wrong. I love The Omaha Tiger. How dare you try and deceive me, show? I'm guessing this episode came up short or something, or possibly they ran out of money. But damn it, Michael Mann. I don't care how many Heats and Manhunters you've made. This simply won't stand. Eventually the thief pulls over and runs through a restaurant. The guys give chase and Starsky gets a tray of food dumped on him, because it's always him being stripped of his dignity. They finally catch up with him, and they cut a line from the Omaha Tiger version of this scene about having tickets to the fight that evening, because that episode was about wrestling, and this one isn't. So it's totally different. Anyway, let's see some footage actually shot for this episode, shall we? Cut to 3 guys in a van, including Edward James Olmos without the mustache, anxiously waiting for someone to come out of a large gated mansion that they're watching. Inside, a father and teen daughter make small talk, and we learn that the mother in the family has been very sick with a heart condition. We won't be seeing her in this episode, so it really doesn't matter. The father, Joe Hames, owns a football team called the Turbos, so they've got money. The daughter, Joanna, kisses him goodbye and heads off for school. And I just realized their names are Joe and Joanna. Fuck off. When the 3 men outside spot her, they move in. She approaches them because she knows Edward James Olmos, and while talking to him, the other 2 grab her and shove her in the van and take off. Meanwhile, our guys are having breakfast in different clothes than the ones they were just wearing. Damn it, episode, would it have really been so hard to fill out those 2 minutes with new footage? What did you blow the budget on? Shaving Olmos' mustache? Starsky's in a rare foul mood this morning. He's usually pretty upbeat, and they never explain why he's so grumpy, he just is. And Hutch has no sympathy, and in fact seems to be going out of his way to goad him. He's spilling his breakfast all over his beloved car and trying to psychoanalyze him. Even the dispatch lady is like, chill out, my guy. They get a report of a dead body and meet up with Huggy at the location. Said location being a crappy diner, but Huggy is looking sweet as hell in his green suit. Maybe that's where the budget went. The guys show up, and Starsky very curtly demands to know where the body is. He's not playing around! To which Huggy replies, and I quote, where giant happy wheels climb to the sky and pretty dead horses grazing in the sun. End quote. That was beautiful, Huggy. Like a line right out of Twin Peaks. I know the psychic's the one who said it, but Huggy's the one who sold it. To me and Hutch, anyway. Huggy explains that he doesn't know anything, but the man who owns the diner does. He's Joe Calandra, aka the Amazing Collins. Hutch is interested, and Starsky's like a little kid who wants to leave the grocery store, but his mom runs into an old acquaintance and is obligated to stop and chat for what feels like ever. You guys remember that feeling? Starsky remembers the name the Amazing Collins, a psychic. Finally, Calandra speaks up. And I really thought he was played by Bradford Dillman, but he's not. He's played by Alan Miller. My mistake. Calandra says Huggy doesn't know what he's talking about and that he was just feeding him a line of BS. But Hutch figures out why he knows the name. Calandra helped the Atlantic City PD find the body of a missing child 4 years previously. Starsky is dismissive of this whole thing and wants to leave, and Calandra is all for that idea. He wants nothing to do with cops and dead bodies. Calandra notices some kids trying to rip the tires off the Torino, and he calls it by its nickname, the striped tomato, and the guys leave the diner to deal with that. They chase the kids, who look to be about 10, and seeing as how Joanna was on her way to school when she was kidnapped, it is a school day, boys. Go get your education. They smart off when they're caught, too. Like, so annoying, or maybe I'm just getting old, but they better stay off my lawn is all I got to say. Hutch, still distracted by this Calandra stuff, just tells them to beat it. Starsky wonders why they aren't playing football or something. Starsky, again, it's a school day. It's morning. Why aren't they in school is the real question. Starsky fixes his tire while Hutch and Huggy go over Calandra's alleged vision. Hutch deduces that he was talking about an amusement park, and argues with Starsky that the guy could be for real. Now, this is a bit odd. Normally, Hutch is extremely skeptical of anything remotely supernatural. He's kind of a, if I can see it and I can touch it, then it's real kind of a guy. Starsky, on the other hand, is normally very open to things like this. There's a whole episode about a supposed vampire, there's a voodoo episode, but let's not talk about this because it's pretty racist. There's even an episode where Starsky asks an alleged psychic if he can conjure up a spirit to help them with their case, or something like that, and he gets roundly mocked by Hutch for it. So, I don't know if their parts got switched in the script or what, because that did happen in a Season 4 episode called The Game, but that was only switched because of David Soul's health issues at the time. Or maybe Starsky's just too pissy to indulge that side of himself, and Hutch is going along with it because it's annoying Starsky. But it's worth pointing out. Anyway, Hutch convinces him to go to the old abandoned amusement park just to check it out. When they get there, he points out that the Ferris wheel is a giant wheel that climbs to the sky. Starsky remains unimpressed. They park near a merry-go-round, and Hutch is like, well, that's pretty dead horses grazing in the sun is what that is. They spot an old van and open it up, only to find poor, dead Edward James almost. And now Starsky's like, what the fuck? But rather than believe Calandra is a psychic, he immediately suspects him of either killing the guy or being involved somehow. Which, okay, realistically, yes, fair enough. Of course that's what you would think. Meanwhile, the other two kidnappers stash Joanna in an old red food truck labeled Rosa's Tamales with a large rose painted on the sides. The truck is in a junkyard where they are actively crushing cars. Uh-oh! Back with our heroes, dispatch tells them that the van at the scene is registered to a car wash. They go speak to the owner and ask about Olmos. Hutch calls the guy fat because Hutch is an asshole, and the guy admits that he does know Olmos and that his name is Julio. Then the owner says something racist about Latinos because he is also an asshole. They get distracted from the Julio stuff when Dobie calls them to meet them at Joanna Haynes' house. He wants them on the kidnapping case. So they meet Dobie and Joe Haynes at his mansion where they listen to a ransom tape. They're asking for $200,000 packed in a duffel bag. They'll call back at 5 p.m. to tell him when and where. Also, don't call the cops, which he already did. Apparently, Dobie told Mr. Haynes that Starsky and Hutch are the best he's got. Aw, Dobie. And to prove him right, they're basically like, you should probably prepare yourself because she's definitely gonna die. Great, thanks boys. They connect Haynes to Julio because he collected his wife's car to have it cleaned at the car wash. And is that a service that car washes offer? I've never heard of that in my life. Or is it just obsolete now? Like people pumping your gas for you? Anyway, their 2 cases are now 1. We cut back to Joanna in the truck where the kidnappers leave her and then have a nice laugh about how they're not going to tell anyone where she is, even if her father pays. One of the kidnappers, played by George Loros, played a villain in one of Michael Mann's previous episodes, Texas Longhorn. Another fun fact. Well, I'm having fun. Starsky and Hutch go back to Calandra's diner, which I'm assuming is about to go under because it is empty and filthy. Starsky tells him about the kidnapping and basically accuses him of being involved. He says he spoke to the Atlantic City PD, and some people there think he was involved in that kidnapping too. He got $10,000 from that child's father and a lot of TV bookings and nightclub gigs. Calandra goes off on him. Yes, he took the $10K. He needed money. He says to either book him now or get out. Hutch calmly asks him for his help in finding Joanna. Calandra says he found the kid in Atlantic City when it was too late. He says he doesn't have a gift, he has a curse. How would you like to go to a party, and everyone's laughing, having a good time, and you know the guy across the room is going to be dead in a week? Or how would you like to know for certain that your wife has been stepping out on you? And it must be said that Miller's really crushing it in this scene. He even shuts Starsky up. And again, in reality, Starsky would be absolutely right to question this guy, but this is fiction, and Starsky is whimsical, and I'm disappointed in him. Starsky, babe, this isn't your heart. Why are you like this right now? Suddenly, Calandra gets a vision of the bar down the street being robbed. They go, but they leave Joanna's picture with him. The guys head to the bar, and it's another guy in drag robbing the place. What is going on here? The reused footage from the opening, and now this guy? Anyway, they fight with him, subdue him, just as the uniforms get there to take him away. Catching their breath on the floor, Hutch says that without Calandra's help, they should follow up on the, quote, Julio lead. Okay, it's pronounced Julio, and I think Mr. Fluent in Spanish David Soul would know that. Whatever, there's this cute bit when they both ask for a hand up at the same time, and I bet that was something that David and Paul added. William Blinn said that they were always pushing for better scripts. They head to a muffler shop looking for Julio's friend Charlie, who they assume to be a man. But then they find her, and she's a gorgeous black woman working on a car. She has some fun with them, giving them multiple backstories about herself, and I just love her. She's only got 1 scene in this episode, but I always think of her when I remember the episode. She does get serious when they tell her that Julio is dead. She tells them that he was into gambling, and points them to a backroom dice game. Before they leave, Hutch offers her his condolences. I thought that was a sweet little touch. They're down to 3 hours before the 5 p.m. deadline. Back at Calandra's condemned diner, he has another vision, and we get to see it this time. He sees the rose on the truck and sees Joanna tied up there. Sadly, he doesn't know the location of this truck. He lets the guys know what he saw, and Starsky is just blowing him off since Giant Rose doesn't help very much, but Hutch tries to get more out of him. When they can't, they go up to where the dice game is held, and who do we meet? James Hong in old age makeup. Turns out Julio owed him a lot of money, and he just sips his tea, unbothered. Finally, he does tell them that he may be a gambler, but he doesn't go in for kidnapping. He knows the name Moo Moo from Philly, and that is indeed one of the kidnappers, and they leave. Thanks, James Hong, we love you, and we were thrilled to have you here. Moo Moo calls Joe Hames before 5 and says he knows that he called the cops. He instructs him to get a delivery man to carry the money and to start at a payphone at an auto parts shop. The phone will ring at exactly 4. It turns out that these two pulled this exact job in Philadelphia, including killing off the contact, which in this case would have been Julio. They got the money and the victim was never found. Starsky and Hutch flip a coin to see who's going to make the drop, and Hutch wins. Or loses, depending on your perspective. Cutting back to Joanna, I just don't feel like she's trying very hard to get out of that truck. She's just kind of listlessly rocking back and forth. Come on, girl, you want to live or not? Work for it. Oh, I sound like Jigsaw. Live or die, Joanna. The choice is yours. And now, okay, oh my gosh. Now we get to the really good stuff. the portion of the episode that elevates it from good to great to my favorite episode. Okay, it starts with Starsky riding down an alley on a green dirt bike. He's got a duffel bag with money and a huge fuck-off rifle. He gets in the back of an unmarked police van where Dobie and Hutch are waiting for him. Hutch is getting on a radio and a bulletproof vest. Dobie tells Hutch that he doesn't have to do this, and Hutch replies that yes, he does. The boys hop out of the van, and Hutch starts getting a little mother hennish, asking if Starsky's sure he knows how to ride the bike, if there's enough gas in it, how's the oil, etc. Starsky's barely listening and responds snarkily by asking if Hutch has tied his shoes. It's cute. And then Hutch gets really serious, touches Starsky on the arm, and tells him to be careful before he runs off. Starsky watches him go like he wanted to say something, but didn't have time. Oh my god, I love these two so much. Okay, and surprisingly, the novelization of this part is better, or at least more explicit in this moment. Allow me to read an excerpt. Quote, "They stood gazing at each other for a moment without saying anything. Then Starsky threw an arm around Hutch and hugged him. 'Drive careful,' he said." End quote. I was robbed of a hug. Yes, they hug other times on this show, but there can never be too many. Back to the episode, Hutch rushes to the phone booth just as it rings. He's told he has 90 seconds to reach the next phone. And that's how this goes. The kidnappers have Hutch running around town and giving him less and less time to get to the next phone. Starsky keeps track of him on his bike. First, Hutch goes to an arcade and then a laundromat where he gets clotheslined by this clearly gay couple trying to fold their sheets. Next is a bar and grill, and he's stopped on the way there by a gaggle of would-be thieves, but is able to fight them off by himself after running for God knows how long. He's super Hutch. Unfortunately, he's spotted by two uniforms in a black and white who follow him, and if there's one thing I've learned from watching detective shows, it's that uniformed cops are useless morons. And if there's one thing I've learned from watching Adam 12, it's that uniformed cops are sainted holy beings sent down from on high. Anyway, the kidnappers spot the black and white and scream at Hutch once he finally makes it to the phone that he screwed up and they're going to kill the girl. Hutch dashes out the front to run the uniforms off. Starsky rides up just in time to spot Moo Moo aim his rifle at Hutch. He screams out for him, but the shot goes off and Hutch falls backwards through a glass door. The kidnappers take off in their car and Starsky follows on his bike. After being nearly run over by them, Starsky gets off the bike with his rifle, takes aim at the back of the car, and blows it the fuck up. The car is in flames, Moo Moo and the other fella are dead. But Starsky doesn't stick around to see much because he rushes back to Hutch. Okay. Let's pause here, because I need to talk about this forever. The episode and the novelization never make it clear whether or not Starsky was trying to kill them or just trying to stop them. And even fans don't agree on which it was. Now, I get that for the plot's sake they had to die so that Calandra could save the day, but I don't care about that. I care about what it says about Starsky if he in fact killed them on purpose. And I choose to believe he did, because I want Starsky and Hutch to go scorched earth for each other. And again, I have evidence backing me up. There are a few times throughout the series that Starsky puts Hutch before doing his job correctly. In Season 3, when Hutch has a plague that's sweeping through the city, Starsky offers the man who holds the cure full immunity even though he's a professional killer. He has to convince both the doctors in charge and Dobie to go along with this. In Season 4, he's supposed to be protecting a witness, never leaving his side, but when it looks like Hutch is hurt, he ditches the witness so fast it made my head spin, like there is just a Starsky-shaped hole in the wall. And then the witness is murdered because Starsky was too busy holding Hutch in the middle of the street. Whoopsie! I grant you that those two examples are not the same thing as outright murder, but it's not nothing either. And it goes along with what I said at the beginning of this video. They're partners first and cops second. Starsky's first loyalty is to Hutch and then his badge. And it happens so fast that I feel like it's more of a reaction than a thought-out decision. A crime of passion, if you will. He wasn't thinking, in my opinion. He just thought he saw Hutch killed and went into revenge mode. In the book, Starsky actually fires twice at the vehicle. The first shot sends the car into a tailspin, but he shoots again anyway, and that's when the car blows up. He also doesn't chase them in the book, he shoots at the car while they're still at the scene where Hutch was shot. And the only insight that the book gives into what Starsky is thinking is, quote, crazy with grief and rage, end quote. Which, yeah, that can be inferred by watching it. I don't actually think the script intended for it to be an intentional killing, because that would be pretty dark for a protagonist to do in a 1970s TV show. Not to mention he'd have to be a perfect shot to get the car to actually explode on purpose. But for me, it's fun to think about. I wrote a whole fic about the fallout from this. I'm obsessed with it. And this is purely from a character standpoint. Obviously, in real life, I am opposed to cops just killing people. I feel like I don't have to say that, but I want to anyway. Anyway, back to the episode. Starsky pushes through the crowd that's gathered to find Hutch very much alive and trying to catch his breath. Starsky tells him that he thought he was dead. Hutch gently reminds him about the bulletproof vest. Starsky collapses next to him and they just kind of hold each other. Oh my god, have I mentioned how much I love these two and how much they love each other. So with the kidnappers dead and Starsky shows no remorse over the fact that he killed them, no one knows where Joanna is. Their only chance is to go back to Calandra and try one more time. Hutch is all sweaty and bloody and has got to be smelling pretty ripe right about now. Just a side note. Calandra is terrified that Joanna will be dead when they find her, and he doesn't want to go through that again. Hutch begs him to just try. And he does. Starsky wisely stays quiet this time. They get the location and rush out to the scrapyard. Joanna is being as useless as ever, and just when the truck is about to be crushed, the guys show up and save her. Thank God. Father and daughter are reunited off-screen because that wasn't important, and our episode concludes with a light-hearted tag like most episodes do, because accident or no, I guess it's fine that Starsky killed those two guys. The boys are having a meal at Calandra's diner, which is still empty of customers except for them, by the way, so they couldn't afford extras this week either. And Huggy is working in the kitchen because this is season 2 where he has a different job every week. He tells Calandra that he cleaned the breakfast dishes, and I call bullshit. No one was there for breakfast. Quit lying. Apparently the boys made a deal with Calandra that they wouldn't tell anyone about his involvement in solving the case. He doesn't want his place crawling with reporters and crackpots. I don't know, Calandra. Maybe that way you'd at least have some customers. Anyway, we freeze frame on the boys after Huggy screws up their orders. The end. So this is my favorite episode. Maybe it's because I let my imagination flit off to romance land, but I don't care. I never get sick of this one. Even if I think Starsky's skepticism is out of character, and Hutch's readiness to believe is also a bit out of character. The running scene, the shooting, and the explosion all make it worth it. Screw it. In my mind, Starsky totally killed Moo and whatever that other guy's name is in cold blood because he thought they killed Hutch. He avenged his boyfriend. I have spoken. The exact outline for this episode was used decades later in an episode of Due South called Heaven and Earth. I swear, there's just way too many similar beats for it not to have been from this episode. But that one's not nearly as memorable. In fact, it's one of the weaker episodes of that show, in my opinion. This one works because of its characters. Starsky's unexplained bad mood to that little moment where Hutch tells Starsky to be careful and then takes off is just beautiful little touches from Paul and David make this episode sing. I don't get tired of this one. I think the only episode I've seen more than this is The Fix, and that's only because I had that one recorded on VHS years before the DVDs came out. The episode has action, wonderful interaction between the guys, and the love that exists between them, and I just can't recommend this episode and this series enough. Next time on Cop Month, we're jumping forward a couple of decades and getting real gritty with it. We're talking NYPD Blue. Get ready for asses on network television. A true win for us all. You can listen to this podcast and my Alias Smith and Joan podcast, Two Pretty Good Bad Men, on Spotify. You can email me at retrotvplayhousepod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.